Hello, welcome back to the Diet NPO podcast. My name is Zach, and I'll be your host. Let's get the new updates out of the way today. It is now May of 2022, and let me tell you, I am really enjoying the outdoor weather. We're trying to get as many workouts outside as we can, try to get some of our outdoor projects done, and ultimately just be outside as much as possible. I feel like now, since it is May, I feel like it's just a big sprint to get done all of the outdoor activities that I want to before fall and winter really set in. Nevertheless, I'm still enjoying those outdoor workouts as much as possible. If you haven't seen from my social media or at my Instagram on Zach_snacks, then you may have gotten the chance to see that I've been working on a lot more aerobic type of exercises recently. Remember, aerobic is when we're using lots of oxygen, so that means I'm doing a lot of my biking, my swimming, my walking, and my running type of activities. Versus when I'm lifting, again, that's much more anaerobic, where I'm a lot more out of breath, right? I've been doing this because I'm working on a Sprint Triathlon, which is basically a baby triathlon that consists of 750 meters of swimming, 12 miles of biking with a 5K run at the end. At this current point, I'm doing pretty well at my base building phase for the past 3 to 4 months, working about 4 to 5 times a week. Big thing I've noticed is that my weight has actually stayed pretty stable during this time at about 200 pounds. I'm starting to think it stayed stable because of one, I've definitely been eating a lot more carbs, a lot more calories during this time since I'm putting myself at such a deficit for carbs and really depleting a lot of my glycogen stores. And the second point is that I've been doing a lot more high volume workouts, a lot more high volume lifting, and I've maybe even potentially been putting on a little bit of muscle along the way. Nevertheless, I do feel as though I'm going to have to work on losing a couple pounds if I really want to continue training in this way. And believe me, that's not me self-shaming. It's just me kind of thinking that, of course, if I'm holding a lot more weight on myself, then the swimming, the running, the biking is always going to be a lot more challenging. Those are the next steps after I do a little bit of a test today where I want to see okay, how far can I go for my swim? How far can I go for my bike? I really dial in and manage those carbs, but today I'm talking about another form of management, and that's talking about the 5 functions of management, a big concept that a lot of RDs to be run into as they're studying for the test. Specifically, I'm going to outline those 5 functions and try to give you an idea of how you can study them, how you can approach these questions. And following that, I'm going to give you just a quick update on how I plan to control my carbs for my workouts as I go forward with my training for the next few months. Now, the 5 functions is a concept that I and so many students push off or feel unmotivated to study. Truly, I get it. Many of us are studying this material just pulling hair out mad because we think we won't use this information. I will say that you shouldn't rule out the fact that you may end up using this 5 functions of management type of information some point in your life. Say you're going to be a clinical nutrition manager, or say you decide that you want to change careers and go into food service. You are definitely going to be using these 5 functions of management types of skills if you want to be successful in your business. And today is about the broad strokes of the 5 functions. Remember, if you don't understand the boulders or the large concepts, you can never break them down into small rocks, pebbles, or even sand. Now, I want to note that the 5 functions is a cyclical process. Today, I'm going to be describing it kind of linearly, but understanding that it can always go into a big circle. Okay? To help us understand, we're going to use an example. Let's say that we're a group that wants to start to form breastfeeding kits for mothers that have just had children and are breastfeeding. These kits will include lots of nutritional items, supplements, things that breastfeeding mothers ultimately need. The first thing we need to do is our primary function of management, which is planning. And we need to plan out how we want to do this. How are we going to start this company? During the planning phase, we would do things like set goals or objectives for our company, because that's kind of our starting baseline as we go forward here. In this case, it would be that our goal would be to deliver high quality nutrition to breastfeeding mothers, right? And as we are planning, we're trying to figure out the short and the long-term range strategic plan to go about executing those goals, right? Now, the way I always dial in with questions here is I always ask, is the question telling me that I'm making these nutrition kits or not? And sometimes it won't specify, but you can look for clues. In the planning phase, if we're just planning on how we're going to make these nutrition kits, well, then we're probably not actually making them at this stage, right? We're still kind of just figuring out all the pieces that we're going to need to actually get that work done. This is the planning phase, the most important and primary function of management. On to step 2. Now we are on to organizing. Think about organizing as your organizational chart. We have our head CEO at the top, we have managers underneath, and we have all these little employees right underneath them. This is what organizing is, which is basically trying to figure out how to allocate all the resources in our company. And we would also do things like organizing tasks and activities for our company. Tasks such as creating the nutrition kits, marketing the nutrition kits, producing them and selling and shipping them. These are all little tasks that we need to help to organize in our company to help make sure that all the jobs are going to be done. We're going to assign authority and delegate tasks during this time too. So we've now found and grouped together all the tasks such as the production, right? Now we need to delegate and assign authority saying, all right, this person or this manager is going to be in charge of all the production stuff. This person is who's going to be assigned to this person. This is the organizing stage of this where we're trying to put all the pieces where they belong into little small columns so that everything's organized and we don't have to worry about that later. You may have heard also about this inputs, transformation, and outputs concept that we sometimes talk about in organization. Inputs in this case are inputs into the company or inputs into the business. Think of things like our human beings, our employees, our operational resources such as food or fuel, things that go input to make an output. The middle stage is the transformation, which is literally taking the inputs and transferring them over to become an output. Then the outputs are going to be the actual resource itself. You can think of this as the nutrition kit, or you can think of this as food or some type of resource that we kind of produce from this. This is what the outputs are going to be of this company. The organization is trying to figure out of how do we put all the pieces into place to get that whole process done. On to step 3. We are now on to staffing, which I believe is one of the easier of the 5 functions to learn. Staffing is simple because it's where we do a lot of our hiring of all these positions, and we also do a lot of the employee evaluation to make sure they're doing their job well. So let's step back on that. Staffing, very simply, you're going to look for words that are like recruiting, hiring, screening, evaluating. These are the types of words we would think of for staffing because this is literally saying, hey, we've organized to say what we're going to need for our job. Now we need to hire people to actually put them in place of that job. Step 4 is going to be directing. And when we think directing, think D and think doing. Directing, doing. I think of this as our day-to-day work of a classic manager. Now, we are officially making our breastfeeding kits on the day-to-day. The planning, the organizing, the staffing, that was all just figuring out how we're going to make the job happen. Directing is doing when we're actually going to do the job of making that nutrition kit. Our managers will be responsible for instructing, guiding, or helping our employees to complete their daily required tasks. This is a stage where our managers require a lot of interpersonal or human skills. Human skills is basically your ability to simply work with humans, talk to them, or we also call them soft skills. Hard skills are just like your ability to be really good at chopping carrots, whereas soft skills is like your ability to work with your coworker. And we need these managers to have really good soft skills at this stage. We always think of managers as being hard and abrasive. But really, they have to have good soft skills during this stage, or else they wouldn't be very good managers. Think about a manager you've had in your past, for example, one that would boss you around, tell you what to do, not give you much praise. Were they a very good manager? Were they very good at what they did? Well, probably not. Another example is if you think of your food service manager that you might have met during your rotations, maybe in your dietetic internship. If you remember, food service employees that work in kitchens, come in as chefs, tray delivery, notoriously, they are hard people to work with. I will say that as I've worked in food service for a quarter of my life. And so a manager who is doing a lot of directing has to be very good at working with those types of employees to get them to come in. If they were just rude to the employee, well, chances are food service employees, if you give them enough crap, they're not going to be coming in to do that job anymore. So you really have to be good about getting them in to actually do the job, hence directing. And then finally, stage 5, our controlling phase. Controlling is basically where we are doing things like measuring our objectives and taking corrective action if we did not meet those objectives. So this is kind of the point of where we have to have some type of controlling piece or some piece that's going to help to be the quality management here. So it's like we're saying, all right, in the directing phase, we need to make 50 breastfeeding kits a day. The controlling phase is like saying, measuring our performance, okay, did we make 50 nutrition kits today? And if not, then we have to take corrective action to get that done. Maybe that's something like scheduling more people, or it's making sure we get a new piece of equipment in to make us more efficient. This is the corrective action piece of controlling, where we have to make sure that we are meeting our objectives, but if we're not, we're going to take everything back to planning back in the beginning. Because if we find what our corrective action is going to be, maybe it's a change in strategy, then obviously that's much more of a planning type of thing, right? Remember that short and long-term range planning that we do in our planning phase? Well, that's where that comes from. So it can swing all the way back to the beginning, and you can find managers at any single point on this continuum here. Those are the 5 functions outlined. To review, at planning, this is our primary function of management that has to be done before everything else. Organizing is trying to delegate and ensure proper utilization of all resources we will need to get that job done. Staffing, phase 3, is when we're hiring, recruiting, putting butts in the seats to get that job done. Directing, think of D, doing, which is we're doing the day-to-day process of making nutrition kits or making whatever it is we're making. And then lastly, controlling is finally where we're measuring those objectives and taking that corrective action if it needs to be taken at that point. As this concept feels a little bit short today, I think you all deserve 3 practice questions from the 5 functions for us to review together. The first question we're going to go through states the management function in which efficiency and performance standards are measured is known as organizing, controlling, directing, or forecasting. So let's work through our strategy as we do this. On the side of this question, I'm going to be writing my A, B, C, and D. And as we go through each answer, we're going to try to eliminate which ones might be poor answers. Again, this is how we need to use this for the test to make sure that we are checking our work, keeping ourselves on task, and eliminating bad answers. As I check the question, I'm looking for the function of management in which efficiency and performance standards are measured. Okay. Well, when I'm thinking of this, if I am basically saying my efficiency and performance standards are measured, then I need to think of things along the 5 functions that apply to those words. Okay. As I look at A, organizing, I know when organizing, I'm doing things like resource allocation, delegating, putting the pieces into place. And I really don't think that we're doing a lot of efficiency or performance standard measurements at organizing. Organizing is kind of just putting the pieces together, right? So I would probably eliminate A in that case because I don't think it's a good fit for our answer. We land on to B, which is controlling. And I think of controlling where I'm doing measuring my performance indicators and taking corrective action. And I check my question again and go, efficiency and performance standards are measured. Okay, so to me, I'm going to hold on to B, controlling, because I think it's possibly a good fit, or at least I don't hate it, certainly. C is directing, whereas what I'm doing, right, that's the day-to-day management. That's the getting the job done, actually. And if I check my question here, efficiency and performance standards are measured. No, maybe where they're performed, but not where they're measured. That's definitely not directing, so I'm going to go ahead and rule out C in this case. And then I'm going to look at D, which is forecasting. Well, forecasting isn't technically one of the 5 functions, right? It's planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling. See, I know it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of forecasting. That leaves me with answer B, so I just check one more time there and say the function of management in which efficiency and performance standards are measured would in fact be controlling, and I'm going to circle that as my correct answer. Moving on to question 2 here. Using problem solving and decision making to ensure proper utilization of all resources. Well, I'm going to write out my A, B, C, and D. My answers here are A, planning, B, organizing, C, staffing, or D, controlling. Let's go through each answer here. So I'm looking for problem solving, decision making, and proper utilization of all resources. Planning. I would maybe hold on to planning for a second. I certainly don't hate it, but I don't think it's the right answer. So I'm just going to put a little question mark by planning really quick because I don't think it's way off. B, organizing is when I'm putting all my pieces in line, right? It's making sure I'm using all my resources accordingly, which is technically what this says. Ensure proper utilization of all resources for the question. I do like B, and I'm going to put a little check mark by it just to hold on to that really quick. C is my staffing, and I know when I was staffing, I was hiring, recruiting, screening my employees, evaluating them. It was very employee focused, right? If I look at this question, using problem solving and decision making to ensure proper utilization of all resources, well, employees are a resource, but staffing is certainly not where we do that type of stuff. So I'm going to get rid of C in this case. And we just talked about controlling. Controlling is D, which is saying, all right, I'm measuring my performance indicators and I'm taking corrective action, right? That is definitely not what this says, which is all about proper utilization of all resources and decision making. No, we do some decision making and controlling, taking corrective action, but no, it's got nothing to do with ensuring proper utilization of resources. So I'm going to rule that guy out. Then I'm stuck between A, planning, which was questionable, and B, which I really loved. In this case, if I take another double check, using problem solving, decision making to ensure proper utilization of all resources, that is technically going to be organizing, even though a lot of people want to say planning. But no, this is a organizing type of role because it's all about saying, all right, how do we use our resources correctly here? Our third question states, a food service manager is trying to evaluate how many employees his a food service manager is trying to evaluate how to manage his employees day to day. Which skills is he using to manage his employees on a daily basis? Okay, already things start to come to mind a little bit when this question pops up. I'm still going to write my A, B, C, and D. And for my answers here, I have A, which is directing, B, organizing, C, staffing, or D, controlling. Read my question one more time. Which skills is he using to manage his employees on a daily basis, day to day? Well, as I go through each answer, if I look at A as directing, I know directing was doing, D, and also D, day to day. So I know that kind of fits with the question, so I'm going to go and hold on to that guy, put a little check mark by that. B, we just talked about organizing, ensuring proper utilization of all resources, making sure all the pieces fit in the puzzle first before we start hiring people. This is not what we do in organizing. Organizing is not where a manager would go and figure out how to manage his employees day to day. It would be where a manager would say, okay, how am I going to plan to use all my resources, right? So I'm going to get rid of B. C is staffing. Staffing is where I'm hiring, recruiting, screening. No, it's nothing about the day-to-day stuff. It's just trying to get butts in the seats, basically, right? So I'm going to get rid of C. And then finally answer D, controlling, where I'm going to measure performance, take corrective action. I don't see anything like that in this question. And directing was really my best fit in the beginning anyway. So I'm going to rule out D. That lands me as answer A, is directing, as the skills that a manager would use for his day-to-day life going through there. So I hope those questions were helpful to kind of give you an idea of how to approach the 5 functions of management and how to apply what you know about them. To finish the What's Eating You segment today, I wanted to actually outline some plans that I have for some carb control as I go through my training. And maybe you guys can give me ideas. The sports nutritionists out there can give me ideas of what they think I should be probably doing a little bit better. A couple key points to make is that I don't feel that I need as much carbohydrates as I might be anticipating. A lot of the times when we're doing endurance exercise or aerobic exercise, they always say 30 to 60 grams of carbs for every hour that you're training, and then you have to load a lot of carbs after. I can definitely see that for someone who's training at a lot higher volume than I am. But right now I need to continue to try to lose weight, and so I'm going to probably need to back off on a little bit of my carbs. Now, remember, where are carbs stored in the body, right? We know that carbs are stored primarily in the form of glycogen, and we know we've got great plentiful sources of it in the liver, along with a little bit of it that's going to be used in the muscle, right? I can tell lately when I've been carb depleted because I felt fatigued, low performance, out of breath, tired. And so I definitely don't want to go too low on the carbs, but I need to kind of find a nice little middle ground. I do think that I can do a better job of spreading my carbohydrates throughout the day to help meet my goals. What I usually do, along with a lot of other people, is that I will eat the majority of my carbohydrates towards the end of the day, maybe my dinner meal, when really that's not the time I'm working out anyway. It's more like I've gotten my workouts in 10 hours before, 12 hours before sometimes. So I've been filling my plate with really large portions of pasta, grains, and other foods, but my plan is I'm going to try to reduce those a little bit and up my protein and fat intake. Because if I take those carbs out, naturally I am going to be starving. So I definitely need to fill in the blanks with a little bit of extra nutrition in the meantime. My plan to follow is to be about 2 carb counts at each meal, 1 carb count at each snack. If you recall, for diabetes carb counting, we usually use that unit of about 15 grams of carbs is considered about 1 carb source. So that would be what? 1 slice of bread, 1 small apple, 1/3 cup of pasta or rice, 1/2 cup of potatoes. You get it, right? So if I'm going to be having my breakfast, for example, that would be like if I'm having my breakfast smoothie and I decide to add 1 cup of milk, there's 1 carb, and then 1 cup of fruit, there's 2 carbs. So that should kind of allot my total needs for that point. And so I'm hoping with this is that I'm going to take my dinner, which is usually maybe about 4 or 5 carb counts, to maybe bring it down to 2, to kind of allow me to maybe use a little bit more of my carbohydrate stores throughout the night and maybe a little bit more of my fat stores instead of relying so much on those carbs at the time. When I come out to all this, it equals about 35 to 45% of my daily total calories from carbs. Definitely on the low end for me, but my current predicament is that I've been training 5 days a week for 3 months straight, and my weight has stayed so stable within 3 to 5 pounds without any really big differences of sugar intake or alcohol intake. So something has to change. And decreasing my overall calorie intake doesn't really seem like a feasible option for training. I could also go about increasing my volume of training, but just with my current schedule, I just don't find it doable. We all kind of find our middle ground of when we're working ourselves too much and not enough, and I've definitely found a great balance between those things. My hopes are to work my way down and just see how my performance changes, and we can't know until we actually try. That ties up the Diet NPO podcast today. I hope you really enjoyed sticking with me today if you did stick up to this point. I hope you enjoyed the What's Eating You segment. Don't forget to continue, rate, subscribe on the Diet NPO podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Check me out on Instagram, Zak_snacks. Reach out if you feel like you need a good RD tutor or if you need some good advice for someone studying for the exam. Feel free to send them to me. You all have a great day.